Have you ever spent a fortune to buy comfort, to buy respect, only to be met with nothing but a look of contempt? Have you ever sat in a place labeled privileged, only to be treated as if you didn't belong at all? In the first-class cabin, refined laughter mingled with the delicate clink of champagne glasses. The atmosphere was like a lavish symphony, written only for those deemed to truly belong. But then, when that black woman lifted her eyes, the flight attendant's gaze sliced down like a blade. "I'm sorry, this drink isn't for real first-class passengers." Not because she was in the wrong seat. Not because she hadn't paid, but because her skin told them she wasn't worthy. The pain of it is bigger than one flight. It is the mirror of an entire society. Invisible champagne glasses denied every single day. To black people, to minorities, to women. And that pain is not just Maya Sinclair's story. It is a reality countless others have tasted. Yet where injustice lives, so does longing. The longing to be seen, to be respected, to be acknowledged as yourself without needing to justify your place. Maya did not shout. She did not cry. She did not beg. She simply closed her book, a quiet smile resting on her lips, and from that silence a storm began to brew. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon is not a scream. It is silence. Silence that knows its worth. Silence ready to flip the board entirely. Before we step deeper into this dramatic, unexpected story, if you believe truth deserves a voice, hit like, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Because right now, you are about to witness a champagne served too late, followed by a reversal so sharp it forced an entire airline to bow its head. And so, the journey of Maya Sinclair begins. Maya Sinclair boarded the plane with quiet composure, her carry-on rolling smoothly behind each step. The first-class ticket in her hand was like a passport into another world, a world of luxury, where value was measured by the width of a seat and the sparkle of champagne poured in crystal glasses. But the moment she crossed into the cabin, the air shifted. Eyes followed her, sharp, measuring. Some passengers pretended to stay buried in their phones, but Maya noticed the quick glances. Those glances said more than words. What is she doing here? The leather seats were cream-colored. The entertainment screens glowed with exclusive menus. Every detail whispered wealth. Yet Maya felt the weight, not from the plush seat or the golden light, but from the disbelief in those eyes. The disbelief that she belonged. A middle-aged man in a pale suit cleared his throat, then spoke loudly enough for the cabin to hear. Maybe she took the wrong seat. This class doesn't come with discount fares. A sharp little laugh burst from the man beside him, slicing through the hushed cabin like broken glass. The nearby flight attendant flicked her eyes over, smiled a polite, distant smile, and said nothing. That silence, for Maya, stung worse than the insult. She didn't react. She didn't need to explain that her ticket was fully paid on the corporate card. She didn't need to list her name on Forbes, or the contract she had signed that kept this very airline afloat. Maya simply stowed her bag overhead and sat, composed as if she were lowering herself into her own living room chair. But composure did not mean blindness. The memories lived close. Times she'd been doubted, dismissed, pushed aside. Today's scene in first class was just the same old story, wrapped in softer leather and a higher price tag, a suspicion about her right to exist in that space. The irony was lost on them. Maya's very presence was proof of how hollow their prejudice was. She wasn't here by favor. She was here because she had earned it, paid for it, with money, with sweat, with brilliance. Yet to them, none of that seemed to matter. That paradox cut deeper than any insult. A black woman, accomplished and successful, still watched like an outsider in a seat she had already bought with her own work. Maya opened her bag, pulled out a book, and turned a page. A simple gesture, but a silent declaration. I am here, and I'm not going anywhere. No one knew that her silence wasn't retreat. It was the first move in a bigger game, one where those laughing today would have no laughter left tomorrow. The man's words hung in the air like a crack in polished glass. Maybe she took the wrong seat. This class doesn't come with discounts." His voice carried just enough so every ear pretending to be buried in a paper or laptop could hear. A few muffled chuckles followed, not because it was funny, but because it confirmed what they were all thinking. The attendant smiled thinly again, not in kindness, but as a way to excuse herself from responsibility. No correction. No defense of the passenger she was paid to serve. Maya sat upright, eyes never leaving her book. No reply, no glare. Her silence rang louder than any protest. Yet that very silence only sharpened the tension. It made the curious wait to see what she would do next. The man, puffed up by his cheap victory, leaned toward his companion, voice lowered but still audible. "Strange times. People really think they can buy their way into everything now." That phrase, "people," was a sentence in itself, reducing an entire community to a trespasser. In a cabin where one seat could cost a week's pay for many, his words cut like a reminder. Not all the money in the world could buy acceptance. Maya heard. She kept turning pages, paper whispering softly while old memories returned. Being asked 3 times for her ID badge to prove she wasn't a stranger in the very company she had built. Being mistaken for an assistant at a conference where she was the keynote. Being called the note-taking girl in a room she owned. Each memory folded neatly into this moment. The cruelest irony was this. They thought she had taken the wrong seat. In truth, it was they who were mistaken, for thinking first class belonged to one color only. Maya lifted her gaze briefly, letting it drift across the cabin. 1, 2, 3 glances dropped instantly. Her calm unsettled them more than anger could. In that instant, some saw it. A woman who didn't need to shout to make them uneasy. The attendant approached with a hot towel, her smile brittle, her eyes carrying that unconscious arrogance. "You may sit here, but you may not be treated as though you belong here." Maya accepted, folded the towel neatly, set it aside. The gesture itself said it all. "I don't need your condescension. I only need what I already paid for, with money and with my name." The cabin waited. They expected an explosion, a scene. But Maya chose the most disarming response. Continued silence. What they couldn't see was that the real storm hadn't even begun. The leather chair cradled her body, but the air was stone cold. The man still darted glances, waiting for a flare of temper, mistaking silence for weakness. But Maya's eyes, steady, calm, unshaken, struck harder than any outburst. She wasn't simply sitting. She was watching. Every glance, every gesture, every silence was a piece on a chessboard she was already playing. The man's smugness was a familiar piece, the belief that money bought him the right to define others. The attendant's silence was another, complicity dressed as professionalism. And the rest, silent or smirking, were just pawns, standing in the same tired game. This wasn't new. Maya's silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. Like a seasoned player, she knew not every opening move had to be loud. Sometimes you wait, and let the opponent reveal their own pettiness. People say power lies in speaking out. But Maya understood the irony. Sometimes power lies in silence. Silence that lets cruelty echo until it damns itself. Her eyes lifted from the page, drifting slowly across the cabin. Passengers looked down, fiddled with seatbelts, feigned distraction. Her silence had become a mirror, showing them their own pretense, their own discomfort. The man shifted in his seat, irritated. He had wanted a fight, a spectacle to prove she didn't belong. But Maya's stillness broke the script. No one had imagined a black woman could be this calm, this controlled, this quietly defiant. Her only movement was the faint curve at her lips, a smile not of weakness, but of foresight. She had already seen how this game would end. Because sometimes the most dangerous move is not a counterattack. It is the patience that forces everyone else to sit in their seats. Uneasy. The clinking of crystal glasses filled the first-class cabin, like a familiar soundtrack for those too accustomed to luxury. Champagne bubbles shimmered under the soft golden lights, flowing gracefully into each glass row by row. The steady pour of the flight attendant's hand was sweet music, a blessing reserved for those who belonged here. Each glass was placed down with a polite smile, a gentle greeting. "Please enjoy." Passengers leaned back, lips curling into faint smiles, their hands receiving the drink as though it weren't just champagne, but proof of privilege itself. Amid that ritual, Maya Sinclair sat quietly, her eyes tracing the golden liquid as it was poured for everyone around her. It wasn't the drink she wanted. She could buy cases of champagne for any corporate gala if she wished. What caught her attention wasn't the wine, but the ceremony. In first class, champagne had never been just champagne. It was a signal. You are acknowledged. You belong. And then the ritual reached her. The attendant stopped, bottle in hand, her gaze flicking across Maya as though landing on something that didn't belong. The smile on her lips froze, then vanished. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cold but loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "This drink is only for real first-class passengers." The words dropped heavy as stone. The once bustling cabin stilled, the silence so sharp the engines outside seemed to echo inside their chests. The suited man from earlier let out a short, triumphant chuckle, savoring the moment as confirmation. She doesn't belong here. A few passengers traded glances, lips curling faintly before quickly burying themselves in their screens as if the scene hadn't happened. Maya closed her book softly, setting it on the tray in front of her. Not because the rejection wounded her, but because she knew this moment mattered. A small detail that revealed everything. In their eyes, money, success, status, none of it was enough to break prejudice. The irony was sharp. They would happily pour champagne for a drunk man slouched in his seat, so long as his skin was the right color. But they denied a black woman who sat poised, refined, with a ticket fully paid. Maya said nothing. No protest, no demand. Just the faintest smile at the corner of her lips. Not the smile of someone defeated, but of someone who had seen this script too many times before, and was content to let the performance play out to its inevitable end. It was that silent smile, not the rejection, that unsettled the cabin. Because it signaled something they did not expect. A storm had been lit, not by raised voices, but by a glass of champagne that was never poured. As the attendant reached her, her steps faltered. Her eyes swept over Maya, from polished black shoes to the simple, elegant dress, resting finally on her calm face. Long enough to register one fact. This image didn't fit the definition of first class she carried in her head. "I'm sorry," she repeated smoothly, but with a cold edge. "This drink is reserved for true first-class guests." The moment sliced the air like a blade. The pouring stopped. Conversations cut short. Even the hum of the engines outside grew louder, exposing the awkward silence inside the cabin. The man snorted again, laughing under his breath as if the world had just proven him right. A woman across the aisle, fiddling with her necklace, darted a quick glance toward Maya, lips twitching into a smirk, before she bent hastily back to her screen. And then more eyes found Maya. Some flickered with pity, but only for a second, quickly retreating, as though sympathy might cost them. In this space designed for comfort, Maya had been cast as the defendant in an invisible trial. Still, she sat. She didn't demand, didn't plead. She placed her book on the table, spine straight, her eyes sweeping slowly across the cabin. The irony was glaring. Champagne was being poured as congratulations to the elite, yet for Maya the drink had become a yardstick of bias. Here, where money was supposed to erase boundaries, prejudice overflowed more readily than wine. Some thought Maya had been humiliated, but in truth the one being tested wasn't Maya. It was the cabin itself, tested by the unshakable composure of a woman they assumed didn't belong. Her silence wasn't just a reaction. It was a mirror. And in that mirror, those who had laughed, sneered, or turned away saw their own smallness reflected back. The attendant still stood, bottle clutched tight, her forced smile cracking. She thought she had taught an unfit passenger a lesson, But what she didn't realize was that Maya's silence would soon teach the entire cabin one instead. Because when a black woman is denied a glass of champagne, sometimes the world is about to witness a storm that cannot be contained. Maya closed her book with a gentle thud. The sound of the cover hitting the tray table cut the tension like a note dropped into silence. She lifted her head, unhurried, unshaken. A faint smile lingered, not pleading, not embarrassed. A smile of someone watching a play whose ending she already knew. The suited man who had chuckled froze for a moment. He had expected outrage, a complaint, at least anger. Instead, Maya's calm became a mirror, exposing his own rudeness. And for men used to control, there's nothing more threatening than a smile that will not move. Eyes stayed fixed on Maya. Some passengers waited hungrily for a scene to gossip about. Others squirmed, uneasy with the silence that made them accomplices. Each second stretched heavier, the silence creeping through the cabin like fog. The irony? One glass of champagne, something many here could afford with minutes of their salary, had become the symbol of an invisible line. And they hadn't realized that their small denial had placed Maya at the center, while they themselves became the spectacle. Maya adjusted her posture, her hand resting lightly on the table, her gaze steady ahead. She didn't seek attention, yet every eye in the cabin was locked on her. Her silence wasn't passive, it was a declaration. I am here, and no one can deny it. The attendant, the one who had spoken the sharp refusal, now fidgeted. Her hands tightened around the bottle, her brittle smile slipping. She didn't yet realize her words had already traveled further than this cabin. They had planted a storm she couldn't control. The truth was clear. Maya wasn't on the defensive. She was in control. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Like a master chess player, she had already moved her first piece. Now all she had to do was wait for them to stumble into checkmate. And the question hung in the air, unspoken but felt by every passenger and every listener to the story. What move is Maya planning next? And who here is truly in the wrong seat? In the suffocating silence of first class, a sudden voice broke through, clear, youthful, and firm. That's not fair. She paid just like the rest of us. Every head turned toward the speaker. A young woman sat upright, elegant in posture, her wavy brown hair brushing her shoulders, her eyes glinting with confidence. A sparkling necklace caught the cabin's golden light, making her stand out even more. Her words cut through the heavy air like a blade. For a moment, the atmosphere shifted. Both the passengers in the cabin and the listeners of this story exhaled in relief. Finally, someone had spoken. Someone willing to name the blatant discrimination. Maya glanced toward her, her gaze lingering for a beat. Not because she immediately trusted the defense, but because she had lived long enough to know the game. Sometimes allies appear not to protect, but to polish their own image. The cabin stirred. Some passengers nodded as though they too had been swept into this moral front line. Others fidgeted, unsure where to look, hiding discomfort behind adjusting seatbacks or burying themselves in glossy magazines. The young woman's interruption had unsettled the hive. The irony was obvious. One voice and suddenly everyone was choosing sides, though just moments ago they had been silent, even complicit. People, especially in cabins like this, love to stand with what's right, so long as it costs them nothing. Maya didn't react. She simply observed, her eyes carefully studying the young woman. Strong words, yes, but were they born of conviction or crafted for performance under so many watching eyes? The cabin seemed split into two currents, those who remained silent, enduring, and those now eager to appear just. Yet what held every onlooker captive was not the young woman's declaration. It was Maya's reaction. And true to form, she offered no words, only a calm, steady gaze. The young woman smiled at Maya, a smile meant to reassure. But up close it was too smooth, too polished. It wasn't empathy. It was theater. Maya tilted her head slightly, her eyes shining with quiet recognition. She knew this type well. Allies who exist only while the spotlight is on. And in that instant, the audience began to wonder, was this woman truly a savior, or just another mask in a stage crowded with false fronts? For a moment, the tension softened. The flight attendant shifted uncomfortably, nodded curtly, then walked away, pretending to have heard the rebuke without engaging. A few passengers stole glances at Maya as if trying to confirm whether she had gained a true ally. The young woman sat back, leaned subtly toward her companion, and with the same poised smile still painted on her lips, whispered, quiet enough to pass as private, but not quiet enough to escape Maya seated nearby. Maybe they thought she was a standby attendant. She doesn't look first class. The words pierced like a knife slipped between ribs. Just moments ago, she had played the role of righteous defender. Now, the mask slipped, revealing the truth. Her defense had been nothing more than a performance, a bid to showcase her own virtue. Maya didn't turn. She heard every syllable and simply pressed her lips into the faintest smile. A smile not at the woman, but at the theater itself. This was nothing new. She had seen this kind of false ally in boardrooms, when colleagues spoke loudly in her defense but voted against her in silence. She had heard it in conferences when leaders praised her as a diversity icon, only to belittle her later as a token. Today's whisper was just another recycled script. The irony stung sharper now. Public declarations of fairness often aren't meant to save anyone, but to elevate the speaker. In this cabin, defending Maya wasn't about justice. It was about self-branding. I am more enlightened than the rest. But one whispered aside was enough to rip the mask apart, exposing pity as contempt, polished into a smile. Maya closed her eyes briefly as though resting. Not because the whisper hurt, but because it proved something she already knew. Prejudice doesn't just live in open mockery. It hides, too, behind false solidarity. Though the young woman thought her whisper discreet, deceit carries a scent too strong to hide. A few passengers nearby had caught fragments of her words, their expressions unsettled. Some who had nodded in agreement earlier now shifted uncomfortably, unsure what or whom to believe. Still, Maya sat tall, no movement of protest. She didn't need to unmask each deceiver. Truth always does the unmasking itself. The young woman flashed another poised smile, but when Maya's eyes lifted and met hers, calm, steady, cutting, it wavered. For a heartbeat, the mask trembled, and in that hesitation, she was the one exposed. By refusing to react, Maya had reversed the roles. The supposed defender had become the exhibit, proof of the duplicity saturating the cabin. The silence was Maya's blade, slicing through facades one by one. The audience could feel it. Maya had anticipated this betrayal. It wasn't a surprise, it was a move she had already accounted for on the board she alone seemed to see. In the silence, Maya was not the one left isolated. The truth was, and truth has a way of multiplying, even when stabbed in the back. Which left one question, heavy in every mind watching. If Maya had foreseen even this betrayal, then what move was she preparing next? One powerful enough to shake the entire first-class cabin to its core. First class sat thick with forced smiles and eyes darting away when, almost unnoticed, a small movement stirred the air. From a seat a few rows back, a middle-aged black passenger quietly raised his phone. The gesture was careful, deliberate, disguised as nothing more than adjusting a screen. But the lens pointed forward, catching everything. The champagne bottle frozen midair, the flight attendant's stiff smile, the cold glances circling Maya. Some passengers noticed. A woman ducked quickly, hiding her face behind a glossy magazine. A man turned his head sharply, his jaw tight, afraid the lens might catch him too. And then there were others, eyes softening, almost relieved, that at last the truth had found a witness. Maya knew. She didn't need to turn around to feel it. The energy had shifted. The truth, fragile as it was, had found someone willing to hold it. In that moment, Maya was no longer alone. But for those who believed first class existed to hide cracks, the presence of a phone was a ticking bomb. What they feared most wasn't the act of discrimination. It was that it might be seen beyond these walls. The irony was bitter. First class was designed to be a sealed heaven, a world apart for the few. And yet, with a single tap of a camera, the walls began to fracture. Luxury, privilege, golden light, all could collapse into the backdrop of a global scandal. The man with the phone stayed steady, his eyes calm and unflinching. He knew the risk, and still he held it up. Tension spread across the cabin. A few passengers shifted, half ready to intervene, then froze. They were afraid, not of injustice, but of being named in the record of it. Maya sat still, her eyes closed, the faintest smile touching her lips. She knew the truth didn't need to shout to exist. Sometimes it only needed a witness and a single small phone to turn silence into a roar no one could silence. But everyone else knew too. If this recording survived, no one in the cabin could escape being exposed. That was the breath-holding moment, when the audience sensed what would come next. Power. Moving to crush the evidence the way it always tried to crush the truth outside. The phone's glow flickered like a lone lantern in the dark. But the light didn't last. Just as the screen captured the champagne halted before Maya, a figure stepped forward. A tall male attendant, uniform crisp, expression flat. He bent close, his voice low but cold, loud enough for the rows nearby. Excuse me, filming in the cabin is against policy. Delete it now, or we'll call security when we land. No apology, no pretense of courtesy, just an order. The black man holding the phone froze, eyes wavering for a heartbeat. In that split second, he weighed everything, proof or safety. The passengers around him, who'd been watching with breathless interest, dropped their gazes instantly, pretending they'd seen nothing. No one wanted to be involved. Maya opened her eyes. She didn't look at the man with the phone. She looked at the cabin, at the way people turned away, at the way silence became complicity, at the way power smothered what little truth dared to surface. The man sighed, tapped the screen, and the light faded out. That flicker was like the last breath of truth, snuffed before it could speak. The irony cut deep. The entire cabin had witnessed injustice. And when someone tried to capture it, authority stepped in. Not to correct the wrong, but to erase the record. Champagne wasn't poured, and now the truth wasn't allowed to be saved. The male attendant nodded with satisfaction, retreating as though a duty fulfilled, guarding the peace of first class. But what kind of peace is built only on forced silence? The man slid his phone away, shoulders sagging. His eyes carried regret Maya could read at once. She didn't blame him. She knew the truth is often not killed by villains, but by the fear of witnesses. Whispers returned. A few murmured softly. Someone even smiled with relief. Not because the truth had been defended, but because it had been buried. Pretending nothing happened became the cabin's new fragile shield. Maya smiled faintly, unreadable. It wasn't the smile of defeat. It was the smile of someone who understood the game. They could delete a video, but they couldn't erase memory. And memory, when suppressed, only returns with greater force. In that instant, the audience realized burying truth doesn't kill it. It only makes its eruption inevitable. And Maya was the one holding the match. The cabin exhaled when the phone dimmed. Passengers leaned in close, whispering as if erasure equaled safety. The attendant walked away, face smooth with indifference, as though he had snuffed out the fire. No one wanted to mention it again, as if silence meant absolution. But Maya sat tall, her gaze steady. Before her stood only a plain glass of water. No golden sparkle, no bubbling celebration. Just clear, ordinary water reflecting the dim light above. She touched the rim with her finger, slowly circling it. The liquid swirled, small waves folding into one another, spinning endlessly. The faint hum of glass against wood rang out, steady and cold, like a heartbeat in a silent room. Eyes turned to her, though no one said a word. The act was simple, almost meaningless, and yet it unsettled them. Some twisted away, others busied themselves with seatbelts and screens, but their glances kept stealing back toward the circling water. The irony was sharp. An entire cabin built on wealth and privilege, full of people convinced they belonged, was now unsettled by the smallest gesture of the very woman they had tried to diminish. The denied champagne had become a farce, the glass of water, a weapon. Maya knew. She didn't need to shout, didn't need to fight. A single slow circle of her finger was enough to turn silence into a storm. Everyone waited, everyone braced, but no one dared ask what she would do next. In her mind, a thought flared bright. They can erase the video, but they cannot erase memory. And when memory is forced underground, it erupts stronger than any footage. A faint smile curved her lips. Not arrogant, not bitter. The smile of someone who had played this game before and knew she held the decisive piece. First class sank back into silence. But this silence was different. Not of dismissal, but of suspense. The audience felt it too. When Maya finally lifted her finger from the glass, would that be the moment the entire cabin was forced to face a storm they never imagined? In first class, Maya's silence had begun to take on the weight of a ghost. Whispers slithered through the cabin, weaving between the drone of the engines. "Why isn't she reacting?" a man muttered, eyes glued to his seat screen, his voice sharp with irritation. "If it were me, I'd have made a scene by now," a woman replied, lips curling with the certainty of someone who believed noise equaled power. The words weren't spoken directly to Maya, but everyone knew they were meant for her. They couldn't stand her composure because her silence had become a mirror, reflecting their complicity, their hypocrisy. And the cruel irony was this: the more they tried to diminish Maya with whispered jabs, the more they revealed their own unease. Maya sat upright, hands resting lightly on the table, eyes closed as if in repose. Then slowly her lips curved into a smile. Not a polite smile, not a submissive smile. It was something deeper, calmer. The smile of someone hearing a familiar melody no one else could recognize. Here lay the sharpest irony. They wanted her to snap, to shout, to argue, so they could say, "See? She isn't composed enough to sit here." But instead, Maya chose the one response they were least prepared for. She smiled. A calm, deliberate smile that cut sharper than any retort. A few passengers turned away instinctively, unable to meet it. Others stole glances, unsettled, wondering, why was she smiling after such a public slight? Why now, after watching the truth erased before her eyes? That confusion unsettled them more than any outburst could. The whispers grew louder. What's she smiling about? Maybe she's lost it. Or maybe, yeah, she knows something we don't. Each murmur dropped neatly into Maya's hands like puzzle pieces. She didn't need to explain herself. With a single smile, she had thrown the cabin into a spiral of doubt. Doubt in her, doubt in themselves, doubt in the fragile order they thought was secure. For Maya, the smile was no accident. It was strategy. She knew anger could be dismissed. But calm defiance lingered. It stained the air like ink on silk, spreading until it could not be ignored. And with that smile still lingering on her lips, the question echoing in every mind was clear. Was this the spark that would ignite the storm? Maya's smile passed like a glimmer of light, thin but piercing, enough to shake the entire cabin. It wasn't the forced smile of someone masking pain. It wasn't a conciliatory grin begging for peace. It was steady, seasoned, the smile of a woman who had been dismissed too many times to be rattled anymore. Some were bewildered, some were annoyed. A confident-looking man shook his head and sneered. "What's so funny? If it were me, I'd be demanding the manager right now." A woman nearby whispered, "Maybe she doesn't realize she's being humiliated." But in voicing those judgments, they revealed the paradox. They needed Maya to react to legitimize the scene. If she got angry, they could call her unhinged. If she protested, they could accuse her of exaggerating. By simply smiling, Maya shredded every script they had prepared. Her smile wasn't aimed at anyone in particular, but it left everyone feeling exposed, as if she could see through them, their silence, their complicity, their carefully polished masks. The irony was cutting. A cabin full of people proud of their power and intellect, and yet none knew how to confront a single calm smile. They knew how to smother arguments with rules. They knew how to silence protest with authority. But composure, quiet, defiant composure rendered them powerless. Maya's smile carried more than serenity. It carried expectation. She knew silence has limits. Every whisper, every darting glance, every half-hidden smirk was weaving a net. And nets, once tight enough, ensnare their own makers. To an outsider, Maya might have looked cornered, but in truth, she was cornering them. She didn't need to speak. She only had to let them reveal themselves piece by piece until their behavior became its own evidence. Her hand drifted to the glass of water, fingertip brushing the cool surface before letting go. The ripples still circling from before warped her reflection into wavering fragments, her smile bending, multiplying, mocking the falseness surrounding her. And now the question pressing on every viewer was inevitable. If one smile could rattle them this much, what else did Maya have waiting to force them to bow their heads? The silence stretched taut, vibrating like a violin string. They were used to explosions, arguments, anger, shouts for justice. But Maya chose none of these. She sat still, a fleeting smile at her lips, her gaze deep enough to pierce through the entire cabin. It became unbearable. One passenger muttered, "What does she think silence will get her?" Another added, "Maybe she doesn't have the courage." They spoke to soothe themselves, to insist silence meant weakness. But inside, a seed of unease had begun to sprout. Because the truth was simple. Silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's the strategy. And Maya knew that better than anyone. The irony sharpened. Those who believed they held power were now the ones unsettled, rattled by Maya's composure. They thrived on forcing reactions, on defining others by their outbursts. But Maya gave them nothing to grasp. And that emptiness, that void, was the very thing that made them squirm. In her mind, memories rose. The meetings where she was cut off mid-sentence, the parties where she was mistaken for staff, the contracts where signatures were handed to someone else while she stood ignored. Each moment had taught her this. Not every victory is won by shouting. Sometimes it is won by sitting still and letting the other side walk into their own trap. Sometimes silence resounds louder than any word. It allows truth to surface without being forced. And in first class now, the whispers, the snickers, the false allies had already drawn a clearer indictment than any speech. The audience following the story leaned in. Was Maya truly being pressured? Or was she quietly maneuvering the board? The question crept into every pause, making it impossible to look away. Maya lifted her head, her eyes bright beneath the golden cabin light. She didn't need to speak. Everyone felt it. She knew exactly what she was doing. And if this was a chessboard, Maya wasn't a pawn being pushed. She was the one playing the game. And now, only one question lingered in the cabin and in the minds of those listening. When Maya makes her next move, will first class even be able to withstand it? The middle-aged man had lowered his head, the light from his phone gone. But truth, once it slips beyond one's grip, is never fully contained. Hours later, while the plane still floated in the clouds, a short, shaky clip began to spread. Not clear, not polished, just a few flickering seconds, yet enough to ignite a firestorm. The caption flashing across social feeds struck like a hammer against public opinion. Black CEO denied champagne in first class. The blurry images showed the flight attendant pausing mid-pour, her hand stiff on the bottle, followed by that chilling line. "This drink is only for real first-class passengers." Muffled through the roar of the engines, the voice still rang undeniable. Minutes later, thousands of shares. Hours later, millions of comments. The hashtag ChampagneGate exploded. Short, sharp posts poured out like sparks. Money can't buy respect. How many more times must a black woman prove she belongs? First class isn't a seat, it's a skin color. The bitter irony was clear. The airline had tried to preserve quiet inside the cabin, only to make itself the center of a storm. They thought deleting a video would extinguish the fire. But in the age of social media, even a fragment of truth can topple an entire wall of lies. The press swarmed in. Headlines on news sites screamed, Black CEO discriminated against in first class. TV networks looped the clip on repeat, each replay magnifying the outrage. Commentators weighed in, activists spoke out, ordinary travelers shared their own stories of being doubted, dismissed, denied. Maya had no idea the clip had escaped into the world, but if she had, she might only have smiled. Because her silence had already made the moment unforgettable. No shouting, no tears, just a straight back, a closed book, and a calm smile, an image that now traveled faster than fire. Meanwhile, the airline reeled. They rushed out a statement. This was simply a misunderstanding. But the excuse sounded like fuel on the blaze. Every word was shredded online, dissected, mocked into bitter jokes. The clip had become more than a record of an incident. It sparked a national debate. How many times must black travelers prove they belong in places they've already paid to enter? And as the fury spread, one question lingered above all. What would happen when the plane touched down? When Maya faced the storm her silence had unleashed? The clip was only seconds long, but its impact was seismic. Social media turned into a giant courtroom. Timelines flooded with hashtags. Black CEO, Champagne Gate, first-class racism. Each post hit like a hammer, nailing shut the airline's escape roads. We've seen this scene too many times. This isn't an incident, this is a system. Respect isn't for sale, not when the price tag is still skin color. Journalists piled on. From major outlets to small blogs, everyone replayed the same grainy footage. The halted pour, the hesitation, the cold denial. Every frame repeated became an indictment louder than the last. In panic, the airline issued a second apology. We sincerely regret this unfortunate misunderstanding. This does not reflect our values or company policy. But the words rang hollow, old, rehearsed. People laughed bitterly. Misunderstanding? That line was crystal clear. Policy can be written, culture is lived. You're not sorry for being wrong. You're sorry you got caught. The irony stung. The airline thought an apology could shield its reputation, but instead, it only revealed its indifference. They forgot that in this era, people don't just hear apologies, they dissect them, sniff out the lies in every comma. Activists spoke up. A black attorney wrote, "This isn't about champagne. It's about proof that racism thrives even in spaces built to appear equal." Other frequent flyers chimed in, recounting the suspicious glances, the quiet humiliations, the cold dismissals they too had endured in luxury cabins. Under pressure, the airline scrambled again. "We will retrain our staff to ensure this never happens again." But the promise fell flat. Everyone knew it wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. Maya, still seated quietly, hadn't said a word, and yet it was her silence that fueled the storm. Online, people speculated. What does she think? What will she say? That waiting only made the airline's position weaker. Because the world knew, corporate apologies can be written overnight. But Maya's silence, its weight, its timing, might cost the airline its crown. The apology fell like a thin sheet of paper in a hurricane. It couldn't calm the outrage. If anything, it amplified it. Outside, the world boiled with fury. Inside, Maya sat steady, her hands resting lightly on the table, her eyes unshaken. On social feeds, voices rose in unison. The clip was shared millions of times. Maya's poised silhouette, book closed, back straight, smile intact, became an icon. Some wrote, "This is the smile of someone who knows truth doesn't need to scream." Others added, "She stayed silent, but her silence exposed an entire system." In corporate boardrooms, executives convened emergency meetings. A spokesperson stiffly repeated the words, "We apologize." But the public no longer bought it. Memes spread like wildfire, turning the statement into a punchline. Apologies aren't on the menu, but it seems they're serving them free of charge. The irony could not be sharper. They refused to pour one glass of champagne, but now they were pouring out thousands of empty apologies, cheap, diluted, worth less than water. The public watched, not only to condemn the airline, but to wait for Maya. Would she speak? Would she write? Would she step forward into the storm her silence had summoned? That waiting turned into pressure far greater than any apology could handle. Because everyone understood, millions of voices could roar, but one sentence from Maya would decide the verdict. She sat quietly, her enigmatic smile still there. Around her, those who mocked her earlier now shifted uncomfortably. They knew the story had spun out of their hands. They also knew the storm's true epicenter wasn't them, or even the airline. It was the silent woman in their midst. And the question that lingered on every screen, every headline, every restless mind was this: how will Maya Sinclair respond when no apology is enough to buy back the respect already lost? That day, the airline's grand boardroom no longer looked like a showcase of power. It felt like an abandoned chapel where those seated inside could do nothing but bow their heads. The board of directors, faces once lifted high when announcing profits or signing billion-dollar deals, now sat in silence. No one dared meet another's gaze. Each pretended to study the papers before them, though the pages were blank. The door swung open. Maya Sinclair walked in. No noise, no rush. Her calm stride, heels striking the wooden floor with steady rhythm, echoed like a drumbeat opening an overture. Whether they wanted to or not, every eye was drawn to her. That image alone spoke the bitter irony. Just days earlier, an airline employee had dared suggest she didn't belong in first class. Yet now, the entire leadership sat waiting for her, waiting for judgment. Maya stopped at the head of the table, her gaze sweeping across every face. Some looked away, some stared back with pleading eyes. But no one spoke. They all understood. Power no longer sat in their hands. The irony could not be sharper. These were the same men who once decided who was worthy of service. Now, with nothing but silence and a short video clip, Maya had forced them into their seats, heads lowered, waiting for her verdict. She pulled out a chair and sat. No polite smile, just stillness. And that stillness shrank the room, stripping it of its grandeur. In her mind, the memory of the refused glass of champagne surfaced again. But this time, it wasn't humiliation, it was evidence. And that evidence had carried her here, into the very heart of their fortress of power. Finally, one board member broke. His voice trembled. We apologize. It was only an incident. We hope you can understand." Maya leaned back slightly. A faint smile crossed her lips, not of satisfaction, but of weariness. Apologies. The word had been used so often it had gone stale, like free samples handed to the public, meant to cover truth with sugar. She rolled a pen lightly between her fingers. In their eyes, even that small gesture seemed dangerous. Was it a signal? A prelude to sentence? And the world, watching, held its breath. Would Maya allow them to buy forgiveness with words, or make them pay with the very power they thought untouchable? The room hung suspended. Not a pen moved. Blank pages sat like silent confessions. Then Maya spoke. Her voice was low, steady, warm, but it struck like a drum in every chest. "You refused to pour me a glass of champagne." Faces tightened. The words weren't poetic, not long, not dramatic. They were simple. And in Maya's tone, they became an indictment. She paused. Her gaze swept the table. Then she continued slower, sharper. "But don't forget, I am the one who can pour or pull the funding." The room convulsed without sound. Eyes darted, stunned. They were used to angry customers demanding compensation to PR crises solved with payouts and press releases. But this was different. This wasn't about wine, it was about power. Another member stammered, desperate. "Miss Sinclair, please, be reasonable. This was a misunderstanding. We promise things will change." Maya tilted her head, a dry smile flickering. "Change?" Her tone dripped with irony. "Change doesn't start with press releases. It starts with how you see your customers, how you see the very people keeping this airline alive." The irony was razor sharp. They thought they were humbling themselves to save face. But in truth, Maya sat like a judge, weighing whether they deserved to keep their empire. Silence fell again. Some faces flushed red, others turned pale. They knew her threat to pull funding wasn't empty. Everyone knew her conglomerate held significant shares. If she chose to walk away, the proud numbers on their balance sheets would nosedive. She leaned back, twirling the pen. "You denied me a glass of champagne," she repeated, softer this time, but the words sliced sharper. "And now you drown me in apologies. But I don't drink apologies, I deal in actions." No one spoke. Her words filled the chamber, the only sound left. And the world, hanging on every moment, waited. Would her next move be mercy, or the end of their reign? The room sagged under silence. Men who once slammed gavels, who commanded thousands with a nod, now stared down at their shoes. Across from them, Maya sat upright, her eyes gleaming like blades cutting through their polished illusions. An older member, his hair white, tried to gather composure. His voice was brittle. "Miss Sinclair, we respect you deeply. But you must understand, this is a global corporation. We will fix our mistakes. Please consider carefully before you decide." Maya arched a brow. A faint, unreadable smile played on her lips. "Consider," she echoed, voice even. "You've overlooked one small detail I don't need to consider, because I am the largest shareholder of this corporation." The room gasped as though oxygen had been sucked away. Some heads jerked up, faces drained. A younger director whispered, "Largest shareholder?" as if hoping he had misheard. But no, the clarity in Maya's words left no escape. The irony was brutal. Days ago, their own employee had denied her a glass of champagne, treating her like an outsider. Now, the entire board realized the truth. They were the outsiders. The woman they dismissed as a passenger was, in fact, their owner. A cough broke the air, awkward, useless. Nothing could cover the weight of that revelation. Faces drained pale. They knew, holding that much equity, Maya wasn't just a humiliated customer. She held the value of every stock, every seat, every title in that room. Maya sat back, voice calm as stone. "You thought I was denied, but I only let you expose yourselves. A glass of champagne cannot make or break an airline. But how you behave? That can." It was like watching a slap land on the entire system. Not with a hand, but with truth. No shouting, no pounding fists. Just the reminder. She was the one with the power to pour or to drain. Suddenly, the boardroom chair seemed too tight. Men shifted, but none found comfort. How could they when they realized their seats existed only because a black woman they once scorned allowed them to remain? And the world watching was left with one final question. Would Maya pour them another chance, or drain the glass, leaving nothing but emptiness where their power once sat? After days of storm, after the press had dissected the story and social media had yet to calm, a special gift arrived at Maya Sinclair's office. It wasn't a handwritten letter nor a check. In a desperate effort to salvage its image, the airline sent a lavishly wrapped box. Inside, a bottle of fine champagne, the very kind poured freely for other passengers, but denied to her. The golden drink had finally arrived, late but heavy with pressure. The delivery man bowed, speaking in a rehearsed tone. "This is the most sincere apology from the board. They hope you will accept it as a symbol of respect." Maya stared at the box. She didn't touch it. Didn't open it right away. Her eyes reflected the faint gold shining from the elegant case. A glass of champagne the whole world knew had been denied. And now the world also knew it was being delivered to her as a plea for forgiveness. The irony was glaring. What should have been a simple pour on the plane now required ceremony, public apology, and a courier to her office. The drink once deemed unworthy had become the most expensive pour they had ever made. Maya smiled faintly. Not the smile of someone compensated, but of someone who recognized the absurdity. "They think I need champagne?" she thought. "No. What I need is for them to learn how to pour respect. Consistently for every passenger on their planes." The courier stood frozen, hands clasped, unsure what else to say. Because in that moment, the gift was no gift at all. It was evidence, a confession wrapped in glossy paper. Maya placed her hand lightly on the box. not opening it yet, just tapping her fingers on the lid. The sound echoed like a waiting drumbeat. The room grew heavy, even though only 2 people were inside. She knew. One late glass of champagne could never erase the memory of a cabin full of silence and contemptuous stares. But its lateness revealed a truth, that justice always finds a way to appear, though rarely in the form expected. And the audience following every detail was left with the question, would Maya raise this belated glass as forgiveness, or turn it into the harshest verdict on a system that once dared to belittle her? Maya sat in her office bathed in soft afternoon light. The ornate box rested before her, holding more than champagne. It held lateness, fear, and an empire's reluctant admission. Calmly, she opened it. She took the crystal glass provided, poured the golden liquid. The fizz bubbled up, mocking those who had once denied it. Maya lifted the glass, slow and steady, and took a sip. Under the lamp, her face revealed 2 halves, serenity and steel. Serenity because she no longer needed to prove herself. Steel because she knew one glass of champagne could not wash away the humiliation witnessed by dozens. The bubbles brushed her lips, light and sweet, but beneath the taste lingered bitterness. Maya set the glass down, her eyes drifting to the city glowing below, like a vast stadium awaiting her response. The irony was sharp. When they could have poured her a glass like everyone else, they chose not to. Now they had to turn it into a ritual of apology, delivered with trembling hands. Champagne, once a symbol of luxury, had become a symbol of their defeat. Maya did not smile in triumph. That would have been too cheap, too predictable. Instead, she sat steady, knowing her worth had never been tied to belated gestures, but to her ability to force an entire system to change how it saw people like her. A thought passed through her. People think victory comes when the guilty apologize. But sometimes true victory comes when they are forced to live with the shame of a late apology. She lifted the glass again, swirling it so the golden light shimmered across the ceiling. The image was more than private. It was a message to all watching. I don't need you to pour more for me. I need you to pour correctly from the start. Some might believe she had forgiven when she drank that glass, but the truth was different. She did not drink to forgive. She drank to remember. And the audience, witnessing, was left with the haunting question. Was this powerful silence the end, or merely the beginning of redefining justice in a world where champagne could still be refused? The belated champagne still shimmered gold on her desk. Maya rested her hand on the glass as though it were testimony. Not a gift, but proof of injustice and of a game overturned. The office was silent. The courier was gone, leaving Maya with her memories. She recalled the flight attendant's halted hand, the mocking laugh, the eyes that pretended not to see. All of it framed now in one image, a late glass of champagne. She lifted it again, watching bubbles rise and burst. She smiled, not for victory, but at life's irony. They thought a gift could erase it all. But they never understood. What needs to be poured is not wine, but respect. And once respect is denied, all restitution comes too late. The sharpest irony was this. The airline had once withheld a single glass, yet now had to pour out an entire crisis campaign, burning through fortunes to mend the crack they themselves created. Maya raised her head, her eyes firm, as though speaking to the world. An apology may come late, but justice arrives on time. The words were not just for the airline, they were for everyone who had witnessed, endured, or colluded. They reverberated beyond her office walls, through headlines, across millions of screens. And the audience listening did not just think of Maya. They thought of themselves, of the times they were doubted in luxury stores, misnamed in offices, belittled by looks poured like spilled drinks. And the lingering question spread like music's echo. How many other glasses of champagne are still being denied, simply because of skin color? Maya set the glass down. The swirling bubbles settled, but her words did not. They kept spiraling in the minds of those who heard. Because justice never disappears. It only waits for the right moment, the right person, to be lifted high as proof. and the audience left in silence understood. This story was not closed. For somewhere in every life, each person still holds an unpoured glass. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.